Yes, good evening. Welcome back aboard the Boyce bus. Your eyes are not deceiving you. My brother has departed the bus this evening. He's been otherwise engaged, but do not fear. We have managed to cobble together some of the crew on the bus, and we've got a bit of a stellar lineup instead tonight. So we're still going to be doing your Tuesday ticket. And joining me, first of all, we've got the guy who normally is the host of Bustalgia. I know he hadn't been feeling so well last week, and that's why the show was cancelled. Phil, you feeling a bit better today, mate?
Yeah, I've passed the elite fitness test. Maybe get an hour out me, then we'll put the subboard up, bring somebody on, who knows? Because, I've been under the weather for the last week just with a sore throat. And, I couldn't even speak on Friday. Like, the idea of, like, speaking was just, like, non-existent for me. It was, like, so croaky and, I couldn't even speak to a certain level. So I was like, I can't do any shows on Friday, which is annoying because there's all these shows and all these news stories about new managers. And I'm like, I literally can't have my say on it because I literally cannot say anything. So it's been quite frustrating on the old sidelines, but I'm delighted to be on tonight, man, and have a say on it all.
You're raring to go. You're kind of like that super sub, a bit like what Lee Griffiths was like under Brendan Rodgers, you could say. Maybe no Tunnock peak aches, but certainly raring to go and chomping at the bit. So it'll be good to hear what your opinions have been over the past week on developments at Celtic Park. But it's not just Phil that has joined us. We've also got a man that is famous for his rants on the show. I think he likes to give the judge a little bit of his run for his money. So I'm hoping he's got a few good ones lined up this evening. We've got Connor Carr on. Connor, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. How's everybody else?
I am not bad. I'm not bad. I'm looking forward to getting into this tonight. But before we do all of that, we should get through all of that good stuff, as Phil likes to call it. So, if you're new to the channel, why don't you give us a wee like? You can hit that subscribe button. You can give us a wee share. You can slag our hair. Then he slag Connors. He's not got any, so that wouldn't be fair. But outside of that, all's well and love and war when it comes to those things. If you'd like to become a Boyce Bus member, it's only £1.99 per month. All of the content will always remain free, so don't worry about that. It's just a little tip of the cap, if you like, for the channel and for the work we are putting out. On to the sponsors. We have also got ED Pharmacy on the go for your erectile dysfunction needs. If Brendan Rodgers is not quite getting you excited yet at his imminent appointment, pop on over to ED Pharmacy, scan that barcode, and that'll sort you right out with any of those needs you may well have. To use that as BUS10 is the code, and that gets you a wee 10% off. Lastly, as well, we've also got Pie Sports still running that discount there. If Terry has left any for anybody else, because I know he was going through them pretty heavily over the summer. I think that's going to be Terry's new thing, because he's not really going to be on the shows as much because he gets a bit of a break in the summer. I think he might be on the old Pie Sports fairly regularly. But again, on that 12.5% discount, and all you need to do there is BUS1888, and that kind of takes care of all of the housekeeping. Normally at this point, Russell would then turn to me and he would ask me, and I would try and do a horrible Hugh Keevins impression of what's been going on throughout the week. But I don't have Russell here to do it, so I'm just going to have to go into it on an improv and kind of give you what has been the lowdown of the week. And, well, when you look at it, it is kind of now time for the summer of love at Celtic Park. The season may well have been over, but the love season has just begun. DMs have been sent out, it appears. Dates have been set up, in both Mallorca and London, as Celtic court their ex superbly well, and they're making quite the efforts to let the past be the past and let bygones be bygones. Naturally, when you're in love and in these sorts of experiences, the feelings will be running wild. You'll have thousands of voices telling you once bitten, twice as shy. We shouldn't be going back to our ex in such a hurry. On the other side, you'll have 1,000 other voices saying, but remember all those good times. Perhaps there's still a spark there. This might not be dead yet. Maybe, just maybe, we can make this work again. And those voices are all coming to unison. They're all coming to a head this week because I expect Celtic will make an appointment and bring back their ex-manager in Brendan Rodgers. All we have to worry about at the moment, though, is with the stories still ongoing, is will this infatuation have a happy ending for the Celtic board, or will it end with rejection, much like the Eddie Howe debacle of a few years ago? We're going to get into all that and so much more, but I think, first of all, because it's looking very likely that Brendan is the favoured candidate, Brendan is the one that the board have identified, Brendan is the one that most of the fans appear to want in the job, looking at the polls, then I think what we'll do to begin with is we'll kind of look at what Brendan could bring to the table if he was to come back, Phil. And I know you've not had as much of a chance to probably say your piece as much on Brendan Rodgers over the past week, but there's a lot of positives about going for this appointment, and we're going to focus on them first of all. And I just want your sort of take as, if Brendan was to come back in, what do you see as being the major assets? What do you see as being the reasons why Dermot Desmond would be looking at this appointment and going back, to the same well again?
I think first and foremost, it's the winning mentality to keep that momentum going. I mean, I've said many times on the show since I've first appeared on it that my favourite era as a Celtic fan has been when Brendan Rodgers was in charge. I know we've had Martin O'Neill and so on, and all the stuff that happened then, but I kind of, being a season ticket holder, I kind of base it on when I'm at the games, what did I enjoy the most going to see, and the era with Brendan has just been phenomenal. That was my favourite. The idea of him come back, very, very appealing for me.
Totally. I totally get that. I think with Brendan, it's definitely one of those ones that with what he's managed to achieve, previously at the club, it's going to be something that we all kind of go back towards, Connor, on this part of it, because he's had so much success his first time around, 7 out of 7 trophies. He's not really ever put a foot wrong domestically with Celtic. Do you think when he's done so much domestically, that could almost make him think, what have I actually got left to accomplish at the club? Is that a concern for you in the terms of the negotiation that's ongoing at the minute? Or do you think he's going to be like, well, there's Mickey Beale in there, flapping his gums, talking about how he was getting the better of Celtic when he was just a coach, not even the manager of the club? And do you think that might light a bit more of a fuel, if you like, under Brendan's fire and make him want to come back in?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it as a concern, really, because if you look at it, he's got a lot more than what, let's just say, Leeds could offer him, because that's who he's getting linked with now. They could win a championship and get back in the Premier League, fair enough. But we've got guaranteed Champions League, as well as, a very positive position and financially stable moving forward. And, I know we said it with Ange, but I feel like Brendan, obviously, as well, he will have a little bit of an itch to scratch and old flames to kind of conquer with regards to the Champions League, because, it got us a couple of okay performances and results. He was on the end of a few hammerings, and a coach as good as Rodgers, I feel maybe feels he's better than that, and he could be the person to take that next step with Celtic in terms of Europe. Now, whether that's in getting us out of the Champions League groups, or if we did drop down, getting to the latter stages of the Europa League, we'll just have to wait and see. But I don't feel that there's anything domestically that's really going to put him off, especially considering now that Rangers pose, if you want to put it this way, a lot more of a threat now than what they did when they were under Celtic were under his tutelage. So, and obviously he's bent Michael Beale over his knee and spanked him a few times, because for to be believed he was the mastermind behind all of Gerrard's successes. one and done success, if you want to put it that way. So, Brendan's already took him to school before, and let's be honest, the guy's a fucking dick. So if anybody, can light Brendan a new fire and get him to come back and, show him what he's made of and say, oh, I bet you have missed me. I'm back and I'm better than ever. So yeah, I kind of feel like there's not really much to worry about as of yet.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with you. I think when you're looking at Brendan, I think somebody like Michael Beale being in charge at Rangers will actually probably make the job a bit more appealing to Brendan, because Brendan has a big ego, like I think Ange Postecoglou, by the way, had a big ego as well. And I think when Brendan is looking at and weighing it up, which is what seems to be what's going on just now, make no mistake about it, Celtic want Brendan Rodgers in the building. That's who they've identified as their number one choice, and it just appears as to whether or not we can put together a compelling enough argument for Brendan to want to come back in. And I think when you're looking at Brendan Rodgers in this sort of situation, he's going to look across the city and he's going to know that perhaps some of the criticism he had the first time around, Phil, was, Rangers were quite weak. They just got back into the top flight. They weren't signing the same players. Although, if you were to go back and look at the Rangers team that was playing by the time Brendan Rodgers left, not overly different to what they have now. However, I think when you're looking at the criticisms that Rodgers has had, do you think that could also play a factor for him coming back, in the sense he can look at it and almost see that, okay, first time around, I won 7 out of 7 trophies. People are now going to say that the opposition was weak, and that's what we should have been doing for years before Rodgers entered the building, and Rodgers was only doing what was expected of him. Do you feel winning, for example, if he was to come in and, win another treble, say, would that carry more weight than what he's done previously with the football club, do you think?
I think it would, because this narrative about the standard of the teams he was up against seems to be gaining momentum. I know for a good while, well, probably after Brendan left, I know Rangers fans have pushed that one. It really saddens me when I see Celtic fans pushing that one as well. I mean, I understand there's got a lot of Celtic fans that naturally are not happy with what Brendan Rodgers did leaving, and that's always weighing in their mind. But when I've been seeing that recently, I'm just like, but look at the Invincible treble season. Like, are you going to tell me that when Tom Rogic scored that last-minute goal, that phenomenal moment, but we were playing against weak teams that season? It really doesn't matter. At the same time, on one hand, you're talking about world record 8 trebles, and then try to say, but we're up against like Mark Warburton's Rangers and Pedro Caixinha's Rangers and that. So it's like, the whole "you can't have your cake and eat it" type expression. So for me, I don't particularly enjoy hearing that pattern about how weak they are. And at the end of the day, it's not Celtic's fault that Rangers were buying these players. They were still, their mentality at the time was very much they were going for the league title. I remember them being very much full of bravado, that they were going for 55, and they even had a tifo display, I'm pretty sure, on the first day of the season, when they came up with Warburton, with Cranchard and Joey Barton and stuff in their team. So this whole thing is honestly just doesn't wash me. But I think that type of noise, Brendan will maybe feel that he does have a point to prove, because again, people are starting to doubt what he did. I think they were phenomenal achievements, but over time, people have started to creep in there, and it makes you wonder, would he think, well, I'll show you again then. I mean, if Brendan Rodgers was appointed as managers, and also I got cut off earlier, my internet connection was playing up, just typical. Well, what a terrible time I'm having at the moment. The internet's even trying to stop me. But yeah, like if he came in, obviously I would love it, just because I'd say he was my favourite manager, my favourite era of supporting the team. But just the bare minimum is make sure you win the league title, because of what's on the line with the Champions League. I'm not expecting to come in and win a treble. I wouldn't hold him to that, because we need to keep the dominance in terms of the way the Champions League is about to evolve as well, where it's about to become a bigger competition, more money, more games to play and stuff like that. So the important thing is, as long as he comes in and wins the league at the very bare minimum, that is the key first and foremost. Any of the cups would be a bonus at this stage. So I wouldn't be like holding them to, you better come in and win a treble or anything like that. But obviously if we did, I'd be absolutely chuffed for that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's something that will be interesting to see how much of a weight Brendan Rodgers puts on domestic, because I think, Connor, when he's coming back in, the carrot that Celtic will be dangling, to quote Kenny Dalglish, will be more to do with European football. I think is where he will be wanting to prove his point now. I think looking at it the first time around domestically, he completed it, mate. That's pretty much how he would look at it. He completed it, and I think he would feel very confident he could do so again. Bear in mind, I think the Celtic team that we have now is, very similar to what Brendan Rodgers was working with in that invincible season. There would be a couple of changes. You'd probably have a few of them, and like Tierney and a couple of others. But I think, certainly about half of the team, if you were to do a combined 11, would actually be from the Celtic current 11, I think, at the moment. So I think he's got that there. He's got that potential with the squad. He knows what they're capable of because they've proven domestically they can win a treble. Brendan Rodgers has proven he can win back-to-back trebles already. So I think he would look at that and think that's a challenge that he can manage. But I think from his point of view, he's going to be looking at Europe. And bear in mind, Connor, he's not going to have the qualifiers coming up this time around. He's going to get the full pre-season. He's going to be off to Japan if it is indeed Rodgers who gets the job. A lot more time to kind of get used to the new players that he's going to be dealing with. Do you think that would kind of light a fire under his belly? Would you expect a Brendan Rodgers with this team to finally be able to kind of take Celtic to that next level in Europe, which is what we've been calling for on the bus for a while, is that we don't feel we're making as much progress as we should be in Europe? We've not won a knockout tie since the days of Henrik Larsson after Christmas. Is Brendan Rodgers the type of manager who could give us, a sustained run in Europe, albeit, the first time around, I would say, if you've got a criticism of Brendan, it would be in that sort of atmosphere, that European sort of atmosphere, if you like. He's not really had as much success as he has had domestically. Do you think that is something that he could address this time around with the squad of players he has?
I mean, aye, because when you look at it, he got Leicester to a European semi-final. Do you know what I mean? He managed to navigate. If you want to see what level it was or not, do you know what I mean? It's still done it. It's still an impressive feat. And obviously, they just kind of fell almost at the second to last hurdle, as opposed to winning something. So, I mean? Yeah, I'd say, considering the fact that this time around he's got a really strong nucleus of a squad, he's going to have hopefully a lot more cash at his disposal. There'll be a lot of things in the background now with regards to, a director of football and, things like that getting set up. I think he's going to have a lot more weapons at his disposal than what he did last time going into Europe. And it's, it's a really positive place to be in. And, obviously, if he comes in, we've still got the transfer window as well. People are, I know it's obviously difficult because we haven't signed anybody yet, but people are like, just imagining us going into those first rounds of Champions League games with the current squad we've got. Do you know what I mean? That's not going to be the case. You could sign 3 or 4 players who could be have experience in Europe and are going straight into the first team, depending on the pre-season. So we could, be having a very, very positive time in Europe this season. And obviously, you're also down to the luck of the draw as well. It's, if we pulled like a group of death with like Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Man City. I don't know if that's possible with the pot system, but just as an example, would be a bit like, fuck, like what do we do? I guess we'll try and hope for the best and drop down the Europa League. But even then, I wouldn't say that would be a negative, because we know that dropping down into that lower category of European football, there will be teams that are more on our level. And I keep harking back to it. The fact is that we're miles clear of the fucking team across the city, and the fact that they got to European final as well, it's nothing to be sniffed at. It should be well within our grasp to do that if we are serious about taking this club to, I'd say, almost its rightful place and dining at the top table in European football where it should be. Bearing in mind, this is the same club that is, the first team in the UK to win the Champions League, to win that European Cup, to win a European quadruple. No one else has done that. Do you know what I mean? This club is built on, making history on domestic and the European scale. So we should not, come into this European football, this European circuit, especially under Brendan Rodgers, who will be telling these boys whether it's the same team for last season or it's on your side, newer faces, that you belong in this stage, you belong in this club of this size. You deserve to be here, and you can progress, and you can become, legends, and you can go and do this. The kind of thing that the spiels that Brendan will come away with. So yeah, it's very much a thing that I think's, very, very good. And there's even other monetary things, financial things that will come into it. We're going to be making, a lot of bank off the tour of South Korea and Japan, and I can't wait for Brendan to break out his custom Gucci kimono.
Well, I'm sure he's probably practicing his Japanese and going to say that's like a second language or something when that first presser comes along, because that will be a box office. I was actually saying to my brother earlier on, I was like, if it ends up being Brendan, that first presser that he does will be more viewed on YouTube than the original presser he did when he got the job the first time around, because that will be popcorn time for a lot of Celtic fans and indeed neutrals as well, because he's going to face some pretty awkward questions, I would guess, when that comes around, if he does indeed take the job back. And I guess it kind of leads us on, to the drawbacks a little bit with Brendan. And there is obviously concerns, Phil, in the support. You can see it on Twitter that a lot of people aren't necessarily happy with, the looking like it's going to be Brendan coming back in, and they're, making the points that he did leave us in the middle of a season, right before a crunch game at Tynecastle, one of the hardest league games that we'll face in a calendar season. He left us hanging, and we didn't know exactly where we were going to turn. We had Neil Lennon, who was able to see the job through, and it worked out fine in the end. But people will always turn back and say, if he's done that once, he'll do it to you again. I guess my counter argument to that would always be that you never know, whoever we're going to get in could end up doing the same thing anyway. You could end up going for a Knutson, for example, from Bodo Glimt, and he could end up having a brilliant couple of years and then departing in like January, February, because a good English Premiership clubs came sniffing around and decided they want him. And I think that is kind of the way that the modern day football is going, unfortunately, with the management. Do you think, though, because if it was somebody like Knutson, it would maybe be a bit of a softer blow because it only happened, he'd only just done it the first time around. But if it was to be something like Brendan Rodgers, and it was to be another club, let's say of a similar ilk to what Leicester were when he left, and he was to do the dirty on us again midway through a season, I feel like if it was a manager with a clean slate who hadn't done it to us previously, we'd be a bit more forgiving of it. Do you have any concerns about that? And do you think it could create like a bit more of a hostile atmosphere at Celtic Park, if things are tight in the league, and then Brendan, is getting linked with other jobs because he's, perhaps won a cup or made progress in Europe? Do you think that will automatically almost get the fans on his back and create a bit more of a toxic environment? Is that a risk to Celtic in bringing him back in?
I don't fit. This could be famous last words, right, if he comes in, but I think if he does become manager, I don't think we would see an exit similar to what we saw before. I think if he was midway through a season, I think he would see it out and leave. But this whole process of the last week, for the manager's kind of conditioned me now to accept that this is the norm now for us. It's going to be a 2-year, maybe 3-year at the most with any manager. But I mean, if it's somebody comes in and poaches them away, that means they're doing a good job. So you've got to look at it from that point of view. There's a reason why Tottenham looked at Ange Postecoglou and they didn't look at allegedly the best manager in Scottish football, who apparently is across the city, as we keep getting told. There's a reason why. So at the end of the day, if it's going to be a case of teams are going to keep coming poaching us, and sadly, this is just the reality that we find ourselves in. The league we're in, the standards we play at. I mean, at the end of the year, we've got this Champions League football guaranteed. But once the European stuff's out the way, what are you looking at then? You're playing teams like Aberdeen and Motherwell. You've got the 4 games against Rangers and that, but you're playing, your St Mirrens and St Johnsons and stuff. It's like you can only do so much with that. So I think any manager coming in is going to be a sort of 2-year. I think fans, we've got to start conditioning ourselves to this is what's going to happen. And I say if they've been snapped up after 2 years, been stolen away, then that means they've done a good job. So that would be success. But from a logistical sense, it's obviously very impractical that every 2 years the club essentially has to press the reset button. I don't know about you guys, but looking at the actual list of available candidates when it initially came out from the bookies, the word that I had was underwhelmed, because I'm again, we keep getting told we're in the strongest position that we have been in years, much stronger than when Lennon had left and and Ange took over. And in terms of the strength squad, we've got the guaranteed money, the Champions League and stuff like that. So you would have thought, when you saw the list of available candidates and the bookies were churning out, that you're like, I expect to see some big names on there. But Brendan Rodgers is literally the one that stands out as the biggest one, because we're familiar with him. We know the level that he can bring us to, but the rest of them, it was all quite you were expecting a wee bit better, but again, that would be us putting ourselves back in the position of, if we bring somebody in who is of that level in 2 years' time, we're probably going to be the exact same stage again. So it's been quite odd. It's been a whole surreal experience when you go back to winning the treble there, and then to find yourself in this position. It's just been a mad week and a half so far since that final. So yeah, there's going to be worries about Brendan taking over, but I don't think he would do a mid-season dash. I think he would see it out to the end of a season if he's midway through a campaign. Because I think he would learn
He's clever,
from
isn't
it.
He's clever.
And then he would,
I think you're right.
Give us advance that he's going, or be finishing up at the end of the season or whatnot. I mean, if he does sign, obviously the big clue will be what type of contract are they going to give him? Because that's always finding Celtic love the 1 year rolling contracts. Initially, Brendan was on one, and was obviously on one. If Brendan was to be announced this week and they said he signed a 3 year, 4 year deal, really, what does that really mean? It's just compensation for the club. It's a club covering their back, but that will be a bit of a clue, I guess you can tell, if he's done the 1 year rolling thing again, or if he does sign a longer term deal, we would find out. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a bit of risk there, but I would like to think that he's learned from what he did in 2019 if he is appointed the manager. And 2 years down the line, we find ourselves in a Bournemouth comes a knocking, or a Fulham, a team like that comes looking for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to need to be acutely aware, shall we say, of where he stands with the fan base at the moment, and I think that could be part of the conversation that's being had right now between Dermot Desmond and Nicholson and Rodgers. Is that if they are going to bring him in, how are they going to try and manage the situation with the fans that don't want to see him back, in the building? I think he's going to have to play a bit of a blinder in his first press conference to try and start getting people back on side. Not that he's not capable of that, though. He has got a very good way with words, and it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if he's got something, lined up that he can, put back to them on that. It's interesting when you're talking about the contract, and I'll go to you, Connor, on this, because I think when we're talking about the contract, I think it's an interesting one that whilst Brendan always got a hard time for how he left, it almost gets forgotten that he did actually sign, a 4 year deal, in his second season, I think it was, as Celtic manager. So we did get a large amount of compensation from him. I suspect if Celtic go down the route of bringing Brendan Rodgers in and the terms are negotiated, I think Rodgers will sign another long-term deal, because I think Celtic will want to protect their asset, because Brendan Rodgers, despite what happened in his last season at Leicester, is still highly regarded down south. I have no doubts in my mind if he doesn't take the Celtic job, he'll find another job, I think, in the Premiership anyway. Somebody will definitely take a chance on him. So I think if Celtic were to offer him, another 3-4 year deal, at least we've got that bit of compensation, Connor, that we know if he does go after 2 years, there's more money coming into the bank to allow us to go, again and find somebody. And is that perhaps slightly more reassuring if we were to go down that sort of route? And would that provide you with a bit more confidence if it was to be, a long-term contract that Rodgers was to sign, that at least we know we're going to get a bit of financial reimbursement there, and it's not going to be a case like, what's happened with Ange Postecoglou, where we tried, by the sounds of it, to get him on one of these longer deals and it just wasn't happening? Would that make you feel a bit more comfortable, or would you be happy with Brendan on the sort of rolling 1 year deal and they can kind of review it each year, as has been the case with so many managers that we've had recently?
No, I think if Celtic were to announce someone it was like a 1 year rolling contract, I think there would be massive backlash for that, and I think rightly so, because we do need some reassurances now, obviously, for even obviously if he would leave after 1 or 2 seasons and he was successful, we would get that assurance, we would get that money for him. Let's bear in mind, was it one of the highest payouts for a manager ever or something we got for Brendan when he left?
Yeah, it was in
so,
the top 10.
And put it this way, right? I know he's before he was everybody's fucking favourite uncle, and he's like Mr. Santa Claus, and everybody loved him. But he never gave us that reassurance, did he? After his first season, he probably did get offered a 2-3 year contract extension, just saying, sign here, we'll give you better wages, blah, 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 whatever. And it'll give us a bit of safeguarding if you were to attract interest down south. And he never did that. Now there's rumours that there's a clause in Angie's contract that Celtic do get a fair bit of compensation for him. How much truth in that is, you never know, because they've probably heard it for their auntie's sister's cousin's dog who they buy fags off in the shop. So you never know, but I think if Rodgers was to come in and they did say, right, he signed a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal, we're like, right, he's in situ, he's here to do the business, and for 2 years probably max. And obviously we go into this, as a fan base a bit more jaded, so we would know kind of what to expect. We wouldn't be, clutching our pearls if he was to, suddenly get the West Ham job in a couple of years or something like that if he did well and when if he comes back. So it would be very, I think, beneficial for Celtic to get him tied down to a longer contract, just so we can cover our own backs as well as give the fan base, some sort of a reassurances that he's if he is going to slink away in the night again, that we will at least get some compensation for him.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it needs to be on a sort of deal where it's going to benefit Celtic financially. And I think the key word, Phil, about this appointment, if it does indeed turn out to be Brendan Rodgers, is offering that reassurance to the fans. Because like I say, I would say on the polls you were probably seeing on Twitter, it was generally about 70%. I would say 70-30 was seemed to be the split. Whether that reflects the wider fan base or not, nobody really knows. But certainly taking those sort of snap polls, I wouldn't be necessarily overly surprised if that is kind of where the fans are at as a unit. So it is a little bit of a divisive appointment. It's not going to be the same way, I think, especially to begin with anyway, where you've got an Ange Postecoglou who the fans got behind, very quickly, even though the results weren't there, because he came across extremely well. I think Rodgers might take a bit of time, even if he does play a blinder in his first presser. And, we're hearing a lot of talk at the moment of how Celtic might go about softening that blow for the fans. And there's talk about Scott Brown potentially coming in as the assistant manager or somebody of that ilk, somebody that's a bit of a fan favourite that could help, cushion the blow, if you like, for Celtic fans that aren't as keen on having Rodgers back in the building, that, could go a wee bit to sort of bridging that gap where fans aren't feeling as happy and trying to get them back on side. Do you think that's something that Celtic should really be looking to do, is, putting assistant manager on to Brendan Rodgers and telling them you're going to need to go with this guy, whether it be Scott Brown or John Kennedy or whoever it may be, whoever they think the fans are going to use to get on side? Or is this going to be a case on Brendan's point of view? Because Brendan's, got a bit of an ego. He will probably have his own staff identified. Not that I'm saying he wouldn't want to necessarily work with the likes of a Scott Brown. But do you think, if you were looking at it from Celtic's point of view, that is going to be absolutely necessary to try and appease fans that there is a number two in situ that, is a bit more of a crowd pleaser?
Not necessarily. I don't think it's something that the fans would really... Because, again, the fans that don't like Brendan for what he did, I don't think you're going to change their ways. The only thing that will change it is results for me. I mean, the first trophy that's up for grabs is going to be the League Cup before Christmas. If he picks up that in the first few months and everything's rosy again, that's the type of things that will get people on side. I don't know if that will necessarily work. Plus, at the end of the day, you want to give him the absolute best chance that he can succeed. So if it is a case of he brings back Chris Davis, who's been his right-hand man most places, then I would say you've got to sort of bout his whim on that one. I understand the logic of what you're saying if it is a club legend. I know Scott Brown's name's been bandied about. Personally, I don't see it would be Scott Brown, but I get what you mean. It could be somebody of that ilk. I know that Brown's obviously, started out in the managerial campaign, but a bit of a... To go from a manager, I know Fleetwood are down in League One in England, but then to come back up here and be an assistant manager, I think it would be a bit... hinder his progress a wee bit. But no, I get you. But ultimately, I think all that's going to really win people over is going to be a results thing. That first game against Rangers, which I believe will be at Ibrox as well. So that's going to be tough in its own way, especially now. Thanks to Brendan in 2018 in his team, obviously the fan arrangements have changed quite drastically at Ibrox. So, he's going to have to walk into that one if he's appointed as manager. And I say the first trophy will be decided before Christmas time. If he gets off to a good start, has a decent results in the Champions League campaign as well, that's how you'll win them over, essentially. And it probably will help a wee bit of charm offensive on that first press conference, flash those pearly whites, get people back on side that way. But ultimately, it's going to go down to results. I don't think necessarily somebody standing over his shoulder as a Celtic legend in the dugout will really sway people's opinion. He's going to have to do it essentially out on the park. Effectively, the players out on the park are going to have to do it for him, basically.
Well, yeah, I think when it comes down to it, results are obviously going to be the most important thing for Rodgers if he is to come back in, and he'll need them fast, Connor, because like I'm saying, with Ange Postecoglou, Celtic fans were willing to be patient. It was a bit of an unknown appointment at the time. A lot of us expected it to go completely south. Early results indicated it very well could have done, but the Celtic fans chose to stick behind their manager. An appointment like a Brendan Rodgers, or indeed, if it been Eddie Howe a couple of years ago, that automatically raises the expectations of the fans. Now, whether they're for Rodgers or not, the one thing that can't be denied is that Brendan Rodgers equals trophies when it comes to Celtic Football Club. That has always been the way. He's got a flawless record, never lost one domestically in his whole time here. Are the fans going to be willing to give him as much time if it takes him a little bit longer? If he was to have, a similar-ish start to Postecoglou and, lose a couple of his first games of a season next year, say he was not to pick up a win at Ibrox, and struggle a little bit against Rangers, would he be given the same amount of time, as perhaps, if we were to go for somebody who was untried and untested, like a Knutson, for example, or somebody along those lines you could turn around and make an argument they're getting used to the game in Scotland because they've not been managing in here. Whereas I think Rodgers, it would be a bit harder for fans to make the excuses. Not that I'm saying this will necessarily happen, by the way. It's more just because of the fact there is that bit more of a divide, I think, when it comes to Rodgers coming in compared to some of the others that I mentioned. I think that's one that probably splits the fan base. I think with some of the other candidates, you're looking at either universally no, or a vast majority yes when it comes to some of them as well that probably aren't going to be quite as controversial a figure in the dugout as Brendan. But if you were looking at it from your perspective in terms of how the fans would react, does Brendan Rodgers need to have a super start to the season to avoid the risk of this going pear-shaped in the same way that Lenny's last season did with COVID? I'm not saying that would necessarily happen at all. I'm convinced that wouldn't. But if, he was to have a few shaky results at the start, how long do you think the fans would give him before those dissenting voices of that 30% started getting on the back of the board and, other fans started coming round to their way of thinking?
Yeah, obviously, I think it would be really, really important because obviously, with a lot of the bad blood that's there with the support, he would need to hit the ground running more so than a lot of managers. If it was your Knutson or your Marescas or whoever, and obviously we know what Rodgers can do. So I'm not saying that it would be unfair, but I'm saying there would be a very high level of expectations put upon Brendan. And look, I think he would kind of enjoy that. I feel like, Brendan very much, has a swagger about him and he very much, believes in his own ability. And I think he would embrace that challenge as well as, Europe on the horizon at the start of the season. So, I think it'd be very important to get off to that good start because if he didn't, then the disarray and the support would almost reach a fever pitch with some people because they'd be like, see, we fucking told you he's not let him back in. Look, he's shite now. But all I'm going to say is you don't get to a European semi-final, win an FA Cup and a Community Shield with Leicester if you're a bad coach. Do you know what I mean? You don't win an invincible treble in your first season if you're a bad coach. You don't almost win the Premier League with Liverpool for the first time in years, unfortunately on account of one Steven Gerrard slip if you're a bad coach. Yep. Those things don't mesh. And if you want to put it this way, let's be totally frank here. The standard in the league right now is absolute dog shit. It is absolutely terrible. So if he was to come in and have a really bad time against the likes of your Ross Counties, Hibs, Hearts, St Johnstone's, there would be questions asked, and rightly so, because as we've seen, the team across the city who were clearly better than can string get a good set of results in, almost mirroring us you know, and we were just going at an absolute crazy pace. You know, put it this way, they done that well under Beale, right, against the absolute jobbers in this league, that they got enough points that would be the normal, you know, benchmark to win a league title. For Rangers getting to, what was it, 92 points, I think they got to, or something like that, maybe a bit more.
Yep.
That's more than enough to win a league title, but they didn't, because we were very much on an absolute, you know, rocket this season, just going for it. You know, we didn't get beaten till, Jesus, I can't even remember because it took so long. You know, so yeah, Brendan would have to come in and, you know, very much hit the ground running. And look, people are like, oh, he's still a rat, he's still this, he's still that. And look, people are saying this all over Twitter. And even if he does come in and get us, you know, wins his first 10 games, right, at a Cantner, and absolutely scuds Mickey Beale and kicks him and his wee mole back up the road, these people will still sit behind their computers and just say, he's still a dick, he's still a rat, he's still this, he's that. But inside, if they look deep down within themselves, they'll be fucking buzzing. They'll be like, oh, always loved you, Brendan, always a Celtic, never a fraud, and all this shit. So, you know, I think Brendan is very much has the potential and the ability to come in and hit the ground running and win the support back over, and it'll be like he was never gone.
Yeah, no, I think he's got a very good chance of doing that. It was more spectacle. I think, you know, if he is given the job, I think one thing we can usually get when Brendan is results. I mean, I guess, Phil, when we're looking at it, the standard of football in the first season, incredible, perhaps best season you might have seen Celtic play. Certainly right up there, if not in terms of a full season of football. It was really, really a joy to watch throughout most of that. And then, obviously, as time goes by, and I guess the other point that some fans will point towards is, yes, it was rock and roll football. It was really good in that first season. And then even the second season was still extremely good. And I think in some ways, there's probably this side of Celtic fans where we have been spoiled because we've just been so good and puts together such good football. And we've almost become a victim of our own successes, that we're almost now like, I look back to even just last season and, you know, losing those games after the league was won, and you know, a few of us are having a bit of a panic over it, and it's not, for me, it was never anything to really worry about because the league was done and dusted. And I just think when Brendan might come back in, he does have this habit that, you know, he'll normally have very strong starts at the clubs he's proven that throughout his career, not just at Celtic but at Liverpool and Leicester, where he went down there as well. And then as time goes on, he maybe struggles to reinvent his squads, I guess, is a criticism that could be levelled at him. And you even seen that towards the end at Celtic. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily all his fault, because we know there was other things going on behind the scenes with the board, perhaps not backing the players that he was wanting to get in. But when you're looking at it in terms of, you know, a Rangers side that, you know, we're obviously trying to keep ahead of, and they're banging their drums saying they're getting better, and Connor does make a good point. They did get to 92 points, which would have been enough to win quite a few league titles over the last 20 or so years. So they have to be taken seriously as a threat to our dominance in the league. Is it concerning that when Brendan Rodgers is going to be going back up against a Mickey Beale, who already knows his system and already knows how he kind of plays, is there any concern there that he could get sussed out a little bit earlier? Do you think Brendan has a few more tricks up his sleeve to keep people guessing? Because what people tend to be coming back with just now, and I know we have short memories because sometimes, you know, people have their own narratives to push if they don't want him back in the door. But is there an argument to suggest that, you know, Brendan Rodgers might need to come up with something totally different, maybe even a new formation if he's coming back in this time around, to actually keep things fresh, similar to what Lennon did, you know, in that COVID season where he changed to 3-5-2, the one that was curtailed early to keep ahead of Gerrard? Would Brendan Rodgers need to adapt his sort of playing style if he comes back up here a second time? Because a few of the managers in the league, including Mickey Beale, already kind of know how he sets his team up.
He does love a good 4-2-3-1 formation, I do believe. He's very rigid in that one. When we talk about Ange was very committed to the old 4-3-3. Then again, 4-2-3-1 and 4-3-3 aren't they that dissimilar when you think about it? Just the wide players maybe play a little further back in the 4-2-3-1, but ultimately it's not too dissimilar in terms of the style that we play right now, the shape of it. I mean, I'll be intrigued to see how some players would perform under him if he does come in as manager. I think back to the first season and Brendan was here and how good Scott Sinclair was coming in for the win. Yep. And we've got Jota already there, ready-made. Can Brendan Rodgers turn him into get the goal output that he got out of Sinclair from somebody like Jota? That's an exciting thought if you can. But in terms of the change, I think his in-game management is something that he's shown when he was here before. He has been able to adapt, and the one that always stands out is when we were at Ibrox and we're down to 10 men. And most managers, because we were under the caution at that point, would have been like, we're 2-2 here, we're top of the league anyway. We'll try and just see it out and get the draw. But he was like right away, as soon as Simonovic was sent off, he was looking to Chris Davis was in his ear right away, and he's giving instructions to players. And obviously Austin Edward came on, he put another forward on when most managers would have just been like, nah, we'll just see it out here. So I think he has got it in to change things on the fly in games if things aren't going well. Not that I'm saying that Ange didn't. I think, especially where you've got to remember we've got the 5 substitute rule still appears to be in place. I know there was some shouts from certain teams about they need to get rid of that because basically it benefits Celtic. Again, not Celtic's fault that they've got the strongest team. Not our fault at all. But that's something that he'll have to obviously utilise as well if they keep the 5 sub rule in place. So that gives them even more options to bring off the bench and change. And he is inheriting a stronger squad. If he is coming in as manager, it will be a stronger squad than what he inherited. And so there's different players, different styles. You might have to find something that does work, mix it up a wee bit. So I'm confident that Brendan can find something to make it work. Say 4-2-3-1 was his go-to. It's not too dissimilar to 4-3-3. It's really not at all. So I think he's got it in to find a wee bit of flexibility, essentially. I know Beale gets a lot of praise for how he's able to change as well, depending on who the opponent is. But I think Brendan ready, because the one game that he did lose to Rangers, there was a lot of circumstances around that. Again, people will comment on Callum McGregor played left back that day because Kieran Tierney was only fit enough to make the bench, and we didn't have another left back available, so he put McGregor there. Yep. I think Mikey Johnston started as the centre forward that day, if I remember right, as well.
Yes,
So I think Agia was on the bench because again he was carrying injury, so we went in with a few injuries in that game. So there's always circumstances around it. But that's like the one and only game that Beale was involved in that they actually beat us under Brendan Rodgers. But yeah, there was a few circumstances there where you've got to take that into consideration. But no, I do think Brendan's got it in him, and if it's not going well in a game, I think he's also got it in him as well to change it on the fly.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it'll be interesting to see if he does have that in him. And the comment you've actually brought up, it's quite a good one from FS because it leads nicely into the next part that I was going to discuss, where he talks, about how Brendan is a great manager, which I don't think many people would dispute. I think he's proven out over his career just how good a manager he is, both at Celtic, and down south. But he's mentioning that, the main issues could be working with the board, and how others have managed to succeed, in doing that. And Brendan Rodgers has failed. And he's talking, Connor, about recruitment. And recruitment's an interesting one at the minute because we do not have a manager in situ as it stands. However, it looks as if Celtic, are still making moves in the transfer market. And whoever the manager ends up becoming is going to perhaps have 1 or 2 players on the books that have already transferred in this window that they've not authorised. One of them that's been talked about is a midfielder, Home, that's coming over from Norway for about £2.6 million. And it's an interesting one. And the reason I bring it up is because of the fact that, when Brendan was in last time, and this is where FS's point comes so alive, really, is that, towards the end, it's quite clear there was a breakdown between him and the board. They were squabbling over cash. They didn't get John McGinn infamously. That everyone's going to always remember that one for the rest of the time as the one that got away, considering the career McGinn has ended up having and the fact that should have been a Celtic player. Just there's no reason not to have got that deal done. Would that be a cause for concern, do you think, Connor, for Brendan Rodgers, if Celtic are going out of their way to bring players in already? Do you think he will get full autonomy over the signing of players? They did do it for Ange Postecoglou, but I would caveat that by saying Ange Postecoglou tended to shop in cheaper markets that he knew very well. He raided the J-League for all of the best players, and they weren't costing us a lot of money. If Brendan Rodgers is going to be given the same autonomy as Ange Postecoglou, I think he's going to want to, shop in more expensive markets. He's not got the same knowledge of those markets that Ange Postecoglou had. He's going to be wanting to shop more closer to home, where prices are going to be more inflated. And do you think that could pose a problem for the board, when they're already going out this window and signing somebody for 2.6 million? Is that an indication, do you think, that Brendan Rodgers would still, be on a leash when it came to transfer business at Celtic Park if he comes back?
Aye, just before that, JG didn't let the door at you on the way out. You fucking crackpot, honestly. But no, yeah, it's obviously the thing that there was stories came out a long time ago, obviously when Rodgers was here, about the fact that he wanted John McGinn and he wanted the Italian defender, I can't mind his name.
Piccini.
Right
back, yep.
Aye, and obviously didn't get them, and he wasn't too best pleased. And obviously, you think about back to when they got handed Marian Shved, and he was like, I don't know why we've signed another winger. We don't need another winger. So Brendan was obviously getting transfers forced upon him, and he inherited Dembele. A lot of people think he signed Dembele. We actually signed Dembele before Rodgers came in the door, which a lot of people tend to forget. So this boy, if the Norwegian league could come in and could turn out to be a bit of a baller from the 2-minute clips that you've seen. But I mean that, my granny could look good in a YouTube clip playing football, and she's been fucking dead for about 40 years. But but yeah, it's the thing is with Ange is I think him and the board got along very well because he did kind of go in that bargain basement area of like the J League and stuff where they're not commanding a necessarily massive fee for these players. And look, you can say, oh yeah, but they did sign Jota and Carter Vickers for £12 million combined. But I mean, if that clause wasn't in their contract for the already agreed price, and they had came in and say they were wanting 8 million for them each or 10 million for them each, not a danger that they probably would have gave Ange money to sign both of them. Probably would have got one of them if you were lucky. But yeah, it's difficult because I with Brendan coming into this, I feel like he'll have had to have that conversation with the board saying, "You fucked me big time last time I was around with regards to the transfers." And look, some of these signings he brought in weren't great, like your Malumbus and your Bukawasis and stuff like that. How much of them were Brendan signings? We don't necessarily know.
Yeah.
I can't remember back to the press conferences much about when we signed these players, and if the articles came out and saying, "Oh, Brendan Rodgers really wants this guy," because I've got better things to do in my life than go back and memorise all of that. But obviously, he did sign really good players. Like your Inchams, Edwards, improved players like Armstrong. He was instrumental in getting the best football we'd seen at Scott Brown and James Forrest. And he can come in and do that again. And look, if Ange didn't get every signing right, everybody thinks that he got every signing right and was bang on the money. Bernabei, Moy to a certain extent, although your brother will not be too happy with that because that's his favourite player. Adeguchi, James Forrest, Mauritians, Abelgard, James McCarthy. All of these players came in under Ange, and they've no kicked their own arse really. So it didn't get everyone right. It wasn't this mad transfer guru because he managed to pick the best gems out of a relatively cheap league. I mean, anybody could do that and get some relatively decent success. It's not rocket science, do you know what I mean? To come in with previous knowledge of the league you came from and pick out the best players that are there. Well, they've came in and done very, very well. I mean, a fucking blind man could probably do it if he knew what he was doing. So we need to, I think the important thing is we know the money's there and there is more coming in, right? So Brendan needs backed 110% because as our Uncle Terry said already this season, if we don't do it this window, we're never going to do it. And that's whether it was under Ange, Brendan Rodgers, Enzo Maresca, your fucking Uncle Jimmy, whoever comes in needs backed 100% going into this European campaign and going into this league season, because we need to make a stand and put our footprint on the European scale again, and show that we're revolutionise and evolving as a club. Because if we just keep doing the same thing that we're doing over and over again, I mean, people say, "Oh, do you get bored of winning the league?" And that, no, you don't get bored, but like, you will be a bit like, "Come on, the fuck, Celtic, what are we doing here? We've been seeing it for the past 20 years. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, look, I'd be happy if we just won a knockout game after Christmas and made a wee bit of progress, you know what I mean, or got a wee bit further in the Europa League. That's all any of us are really asking for. And I know I said famous last words. I said, as long as Andrew's here and he's back properly, we'll win a European trophy, and then he's fucked off. But
well, that's our plan going.
I know.
You'll be saying about Brendan next, Connor.
I know. I'll be keeping my mouth firmly shut on that because I am an absolute walking jinx. But I think it'll be really important to do that. And look, I just really hope that him and the board can, all stand around inside Celtic Park and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and we'll all have a very good season coming forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Absolutely. I think when you're looking at Brendan Rodgers as well, Phil, there's also going to be talks now with Ange Postecoglou coming back in for certain players. I think that is inevitable. Which, interestingly, again, was another thing that Brendan Rodgers never actually did. I think he maybe tried to get McGregor and then realised that wasn't for happening, and then backed off and never went near any of the rest of our team again. I don't think Ange Postecoglou will be quite the same. I have a feeling he will come in for at least one, possibly more, of our players this window. I think Rio Hatate, for example, will end up at Tottenham come the close of the window. That's what my gut tells me. But if it's not Tottenham, I think Hatate will move on regardless. I think we're inevitably braced for losing one of our big players in the summer, because I just think they've had such a good season. We're inevitably going to get a bid for somebody that will be too good to turn down. Now, what we've obviously been talking about and what's been going on in the chat and what's going on Twitter, and probably one of the biggest things about Brendan Rodgers is you can give him the money, but can he find a player necessarily? Because we look at his transfer record, and I think, people, if they want to compare him with Ange Postecoglou, and perhaps it's a bit of an unfair comparison, but Ange Postecoglou was somebody who had probably more hits than misses when you put the lists together. Granted, I will accept on both of these lists that some of these signings probably were not Ange Postecoglou signings, and some of the signings won't be Brendan Rodgers signings that happened when he was in charge either. They were both had players pushed on them by the board. Connor mentioned when James McCarthy was absolutely not an Ange Postecoglou signing. He had no idea who James McCarthy would have been. He was just wanting the numbers as far as I'm concerned at that time. And, likewise with Brendan Rodgers, he's had a few pushed down him. But it's still a point that, wherever Brendan Rodgers has been, fans have turned around and questioned his ability to identify players. And he's definitely got areas where he perhaps has a blind spot. I look at, goalkeeper, for example, which ironically, me and Russell have been saying for weeks, we probably need a new goalkeeper in the summer. Before we knew Ange Postecoglou was leaving, we think that's a position that needs strengthened. Is Brendan Rodgers, if he's given the money, would you fully trust him with that money, or would the board fully trust him with that money to go out there and, perhaps break the record transfer? The record transfer is about 9 million for Edouard. Would Celtic authorise to Brendan Rodgers to go out and sign a player for 10 to 15 million pounds? And do you think, given his track record in there, which I would say is maybe about 50-50 as to the players he's brought in that have been success and which ones haven't, that they would feel that's a risk worth taking?
I think if you want to be considered a big club, you've got to do big club things. So I do think a marquee signing, again, we're talking about things that can get fans on side with Brendan. That would be the type of thing that would, an Edouard level type of signing, 9 million up the way, that type of exciting. I think that's what gets fans' attention. So I think that would be something good. Whether I trust him or not, I mean, I know I'll also sound like a Brendan apologist, because I've said, again, I said at the start of the show, I've said many times how much I enjoyed his time here. But I do think as well, there's got to be a bit of context applied when it comes to when people critique his transfer records at Liverpool, Celtic, and obviously even at Leicester as well in recent years as well. Because am I right saying when he went to Leicester, had the accident happened with the chairman yet, or did that happen when Brendan was manager? Remember the chairman died in a helicopter crash after the game?
I think that was before, I can't remember.
Just before.
Was it there?
And then it was his son that took over. Because initially, obviously, because he brought in, I think he signed like Yuri Tielemans and stuff like that, who phenomenal player. I know he went to Aston Villa on a free transfer the other day, so fair play to them. But he did have some decent players in at Leicester, and I know a massive problem with the investment there is the son took over after the father passed away in the helicopter crash. But King Power, who are the sponsor, they're like, how they make their money is they are basically a chain of like duty-free shops in airports. What's happened in the last few years, it caused airports to close down. The COVID pandemic, so obviously they get hit with money. So that was the reason why Leicester's investment began to plummet. I think it was last season he let Kasper Schmeichel go, and he was basically forced to use Danny Ward as a goalkeeper, and Jamie Vardy, 35-year-old, got a new 2-year deal and stuff. And it's like you could kind of see the writing on the wall with the way the investment was going at Leicester. But before that, 2 fifth-place finishes and an FA Cup. I think he won the Community Shield as well. So he did no bad there, but his investment, I think some of the players that he did pluck were pretty decent. And at Liverpool, I think they did what Tottenham did when they sold Gareth Bale, where they sold a big player for big money, and then they just went scattergun and just won with everything, like Balotelli and stuff. I know people talk about the transfer committee at Liverpool, and that. So at the end of the day, he's still going to have a say. So he can't escape that one totally. He's still going to have to basically, sign off on them. This committee can present players to him. But yeah, ultimately he's still going to have some. So there is a bit of a sketchy one there with Liverpool. The Celtic one, again, looking at the clues of how it ended and the little subtle digs that he made through the shred thing, and signing Marvin Compere in that January window and playing him for 20 minutes. And, so it was like, so how many of those players was he really wanting? Was he in charge of getting and so on? So when he got it right, he really got it right. As he Sinclair, Dembele, as he could have been a dialer signing essentially because he was a free transfer. Edouard Cham was really, really good initially. It just fell apart in the in the later time for Cham at the club. But yeah, ultimately, when he got it right, he was bang on with it. But yeah, overall, I would probably trust him. I would probably, because I think a marquee signing is exactly the type of thing we would need. In the first sort of window, or maybe even after the January window might be a bit tough. We always get told the January window is so hard to sign players, but I do think that would be something that would definitely help again get fans on side, because you see the fans, the optics of it, the fans see him come in and a big signing made right away, and then you start to think, right, we're really having a go at this year, because again, as we've talked on, the European record is abysmal. A club of our size should not be sitting 20 years deep now from the last time that we won a knockout stage after Christmas, and some of the teams that have beaten us in these games after Christmas are absolutely abysmal. So we should be looking to make some sort of stamp in Europe this season, and yeah, big signings like that definitely give that impression that we're going to try that this season. So I would trust them with a decent budget.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it will be very interesting to see what ends up happening there in terms of his transfer kitty, because I would imagine that will be one of the decisions that are still to be made as to whether or not he comes back in. It'll be one of the key arguments on both sides as to what that budget will be and to what Brendan will be able to spend. I think one thing's for sure, he'll always be able to develop the players on that he has, but the board, I think, are going to need to back him. And I think AGSC Tech is absolutely correct that if the board are going to get Brendan Rodgers in, they are going to have to give him a large budget, certainly initially at least. And then depending on how things go in Europe, he can, perhaps have to downgrade his budget if things don't go the way we want in there. But provided it continues on a steady stream and we have success in Europe, as you alluded to, Phil, I cannot see any reason why Brendan could not end up, surpassing the transfer record of Edouard, multiple times if he is to come back in. And I think that is the kind of assurances he is going to be needing. But, we're over an hour now, so we'll wrap it up at this point. I'm not sure what's all coming up this week. I would imagine Thursday Night Forum will be back. Steve will be in charge of that. I'm not sure what his panel, as we like to be called on the Thursday Night Forum, I think seems to be the recurring name now. But I'm sure Steve will keep us all posted as to who's coming on that. Bustalgia, Phil, is that back this Friday?
It might be. I mean, I'm doing something that the Celtic board aren't very good at doing things. I'm reading the room, because obviously Bustalgia, I'm going back and talk about old seasons and stuff, and I'm like, do the viewers really want to listen to that just now? Because it's a hot topic, and you may as well continue, because this is an ever-changing story. We had a moment last week where Steve-O did one of his shows in the afternoon with some of the guys, and then by that evening, when like the TNF went on, it was like the new favourite. It all changed again in the bookie odds, so it's such a developing story. So Friday, Bustalgia might be on. We'll wait and see. If not, my plan last week was to do something more relevant to what's going on now. But I say my voice was gone completely, so that might happen again. But if things simmer down, we do get a manager appointed, then we'll see. I'm playing it by ear essentially at the moment regarding Bustalgia, if it's worth doing, or do we stay on top of this story, because this is the biggest story in Scottish football this summer, without a doubt.
Yeah, no, definitely. As I said at the start, it's a summer of love, and I think come Friday, Celtic and Brendan Rodgers might just be married back at the altar again. But, for me, Connor, Phil, that's us. We are out of here. Phil, I'll let you do the credits. Good night, everyone. Take care. See you later.
See you later, guys.
Folks.